Carolina UCLA before the holiday break. Tar Heels were down 16. A story we have seen before. Carolina down by 16 at one point. Comes all the way back and this time holds on. It was following a similar path of the Kansas, Florida, Michigan State path of Tar Heels down big, came back to take the lead, but then got shaky. Fortunately, the Tar Heels were able to hold on this time. And in fact, Carolina only took the lead in this game at the very end. 2 free throws by R.J. Davis with about 14 seconds left gave Carolina its first lead since it was 2-0. And so they came all the way back, though, took the lead, got a defensive stop that they needed, and eventually won it by 2, 76-74. Then after the holidays, Heels come back and beat Campbell 97-81. I'm not even sure that score tells you. I mean, Carolina was up nearly 30 with about 5 or 6 minutes left, and then as sometimes happens with this version of the Tar Heels, the defense got a little lax. Campbell hit some shots and made the final score a little closer than maybe the game was, at least in the second half. Adam, the Campbell game is one you would fully expect Carolina to win. At home, Tar Heels better than Campbell. The UCLA game, Tar Heels badly needed a win that is going to stay a quality win. I think that one will. UCLA has since beaten Gonzaga. They're ranked in the top 20 at the moment. So a quality win. And gives Carolina, I think, its best win of the season. And paired with that Dayton victory, they're 2 wins that through that gauntlet of the non-conference that they can hang their hat on. So very much needed performance and victory for Carolina. Again, the Campbell game, if you'd have stopped that game with 5 minutes left, I think we're probably saying, oh, man, what a great performance. And the Tar Heels were terrific in the second half and, just did what they're supposed to do against Campbell. It got a little sloppy at the end. But end of the day, not a game that's going to be uber impactful, I don't think, moving forward. Most importantly, Tar Heels won it. So 8-5 through the non-conference portion of the schedule with one ACC game mixed in there, that victory over Georgia Tech. The record, I know Carolina would like it to be better for sure. They would have liked to have been able to hold on to some of those games or prevail in some of those close games, notably Kansas, Michigan State, and Florida. But Carolina's won a couple of games. It seems like they feel like they're starting to get some stuff figured out. And now they're going to a really important stretch here, back-to-back road games in conference, difficult places to go play at Louisville, at Notre Dame, Saturday at noon. I mean, one of those that can be a sleepy start if you let it, which this team can do. So, good that the Tar Heels won. Still a lot of questions to be answered, but the Heels still have their head above water, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, the schedule has broken such that because of the performance in the non-conference schedule, you're starting out 2025 with 2 games that you could imagine a normal Carolina team losing one of these 2 because these are pretty good teams on the road with good coaches, but the Tar Heels have no cushion to lose these games. They need to win these games. You're also potentially going to have to play without Seth Trimble, who didn't play against Campbell because of the upper body injury, and his return has not been announced any kind of timeline. So you could potentially be down a body, but here's the piece of news that goes with that. When the Tar Heels moved Seth Trimble out of the starting lineup, by necessity, they moved Ian Jackson in, and he's been terrific. 50 points in 2 games and averaging over 16 a game in his last 8. So he's really played well. I do think the defense is a concern, and I think we're going to find out how much of a concern because these ACC teams are not as good as the teams Carolina has played. But neither is Campbell, and Campbell scored 81. And that Campbell game is kind of a throwaway in every way other than Carolina dropped 6 in the net because they didn't blow Campbell out. And we've talked before about how stupid that is. It is stupid. It's still stupid. But it's also how it is.
Yeah, that's where getting sloppy defensively in the last 5 minutes hurts.
It does matter. And it costs Carolina a couple spots in the net Will that eventually end up mattering in March? We certainly hope not. If the Tar Heels just go 20-0 in the ACC, it'll make no difference at all.
Be great.
But those are a couple positions that you couldn't really afford to give away because you weren't able to get the win over Michigan State or the win over Kansas or any of those other wins that we're well acquainted with. But, I mean, if Carolina just plays the way they showed glimmers of being able to play at the end of the game against UCLA, when Jalen Washington got a big rebound and Carolina made the defensive stops they had to make, and at times against Campbell, especially offensively because R.J. Davis looked like R.J. Davis, then none of the 2 or 3 spots that you lost in the net because you didn't blow them out by 25 will never matter because you'll get other big wins. It's only if you don't get those other big wins that it might matter.
Adam, I think individually, as you referenced, the biggest story is Ian Jackson right now for Carolina. You said it at some point in there, 50 points over the last 2 games. He's just got to play. He is probably, along with Drake Powell, I just think those 2 guys probably have the highest ceilings on Carolina's team. And so you just got to find a way to get them minutes. And I think almost any other year, this wouldn't even be a discussion. You'd just be like, yes, Ian Jackson is going to play a lot. But just with the way that the roster is constructed, that is maybe a little challenging isn't the right word. It's just you have to be more creative, I guess, of how you play. But Hubert Davis said with us last night after the game that he really liked R.J. Davis and Ian Jackson being out there together. And I don't think it's a huge coincidence that R.J. Davis's offensive numbers have started. They're not where they were last year, but they've started to improve these last couple of games as Ian Jackson has played more, because now all of a sudden the defense can't just say, just stop R.J. Davis and they'll have a harder time scoring. Now you have multiple guys out there on the floor who are legitimate big-time scoring threats. And it's just harder to guard Carolina when you have multiple guys out there who can go get buckets. And so how Carolina figures out how to get those 2 on the floor for the most amount of time possible, while also still using the assets that Cadeau brings and Trimble brings and whoever else, Withers brings, Powell brings, whatever. How they figure that out, I think, is going to be the biggest question over the next couple weeks.
Well, and you have to be careful because just like it wasn't fair when Seth Trimble went out and scored 30 against Memphis.
That's right.
To say, oh, here's the answer. He's the greatest player in basketball history. He should play all the time. No one else ever needs to play. You don't want to swing back the other way as far when Ian Jackson is now the new greatest player in basketball history and has to play all the time to the expense of everyone else. There's still going to be days that Ian Jackson looks like a freshman. I do think he raises the floor a little bit because of the way he can score. Like he's not just tossing in a bunch of threes. He's driving to the rim. He's getting fouled. I do think he's going to continue to get those fouls probably. Just because of the way he plays, and if he continues to shoot free throws well, that's a way to create offense whether your jump shot's going in or not. So you're right. The offense looks good with them out there, and I know you need 5 guys, but if you have Elliot Cadeau has the ball, and you have R.J. Davis standing in one corner, and you have Ian Jackson standing in the other corner, that's a stressful setup for a defense. You can't guard all those guys. And so now the Tar Heels have to go down to the other end and guard that other team also, which has been a problem.
Yeah.
That's what they've got to figure out. But I do think we're moving closer to like a Jay Wright Villanova team.
I agree.
Without, unfortunately, quite the size that those teams had in some of their backcourts.
Well, and speaking of size, and we talked about this a little bit on the Rapid Reactions podcast after the Campbell game, Jalen Washington is the other piece of this, Adam, because I do think of all the guys that have been rotating at that big guy position, he's the one that feels like he has the skill set to be the one who you could plug in there and ultimately have Carolina be as successful as possible. That doesn't mean that Ty Claude or Vinal Lubin or whoever can't play and can't be effective, because I think they can be. But Jalen Washington is the guy who, if he just can hit that baseline of block some shots, get some rebounds, get some offensive putbacks, get some dunks on the pick and roll, get a lob or two. Like, that's if he can fill that role, I think that greatly increases Carolina's chances of being successful.
And I think, and we've had him in here a couple times, I think he's capable of understanding the idea that we know you can shoot. You can shoot on the perimeter. But that's not what this team needs you to do. They need you to be a better Matt Christensen. Yeah. Which, like, think about those Duke teams, and you're always like, how is he on the court? Because he only did what they needed him to do. And I thought Jalen Washington did a little bit of that against Campbell. He had the flurry where he got a couple offensive rebounds. Now, some of those were off his misses, but as Armando Bacot proved, those count also.
Yep.
He had the big play against UCLA, set some screens, pick up some fouls, being a guy who's willing to run into people and stand under the basket on defense and make it look like you might block a shot, even if you don't actually do it. Just be a presence that at least gives the other team a little bit of pause that, okay, if we drive in there, it might be a turnover. That's what the Tar Heels need him to do.
So 8-5 Carolina through 13 games and heading into nothing but conference play remaining in the regular season. Adam, one last thing, then we'll look at Louisville a little bit. RJ Davis was 7 of 13 from the field and 5 of 10 from 3. That's good. That is closer to what – I mean, that's actually probably higher than what you would expect from RJ Davis or anybody. Shooting 50% from 3 consistently would be hard to do. He's threatening to start looking like the guy that we saw last year. I think the Florida game, the UCLA game, and now this Campbell game, he's creeping closer to more the type of player that we thought we may see this year. And again, it's unrealistic, unfair, and not sustainable to try and match what you did last year if you're RJ Davis. You were a first-team All-America. If you're able to get there again, awesome. But to set that as like the baseline of what you have to do is unrealistic. But if he can get closer to that, clearly that makes Carolina a better team, and I think he's at least been closer to that here in the last couple weeks.
He was shooting 25% from 3 going into the Campbell
this is a guy who was 37% career before this season from 3, and he was 40% last year from 3, and he's at 25 coming in that Campbell game this season.
If he just shoots 35% the rest of the way to get the season percentage up to 30, Carolina's going to win some of these games that they lost in November and December. And some of those shots are variable, like the end of the shot clock where he's having to create something. But think about some of the threes he missed that were just catch and shoot open threes. That number is going to go up. It has to. We've seen him for 4 years. It would be extremely fluky if it stayed where it is over this course of 35 games. So I really do think that number is going to come up, and you're right. He's not going to shoot 50% from 3, but you don't need him to. You need him to shoot 35% from 3. And the shots he will get, as in theory, defenses have to maybe collapse on Ian Jackson as he drives to the rim, and then there's RJ Davis standing out there by himself. If he can make 4 out of 10 of those catch and shoot wide open shots, Carolina's pretty good.